Jennifer Nelson here, host of the Pocket Hours podcast. Here at Pocket Hours, I get to interview fabulous individuals in our industry to help educate us all and to up our game. We get to hear from them their secret sauce, how they are successful to hopefully help inspire us to do better work. The cool part is, as you listen to these interviews, you can also get clock hours on the go. So you listen to a podcast and then you email us at info@scoutrealestate.com to learn more about obtaining those hours. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in, and let's have some fun learning how to be better at what we do. Hi folks, Jennifer Nelson here with Pocket Hours, and I got to twist Jimmy's arm to get him to take time of his very, very busy schedule to be on this podcast so you guys can learn from him and hear from him about his story. So Jimmy, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
I even took him away from his daughter's soccer tournament. So he is the dad here, that extraordinaire, who's also trying to balance his real estate life. So as we all are. So I appreciate you taking the time. Jimmy, I want to just start. Let's go back just for a minute to pre-real estate, pre-flipping Jimmy. What are you doing in your past life for work? Tell us a little bit about that.
I was actually a student athlete. Really, my job was a full-time soccer player growing up. And I played soccer at the University of Washington. And I traveled a lot for sports and primarily soccer, which is what I ended up going to University of Washington to do. And so that kept me pretty busy until school got done. And once school got done, my parents actually have a drug and alcohol recovery center that they own. They have a small business out in Federal Way. And so that gave me something to do with little to no work experience prior to that. I was a server and a cook. So I did a little bit of that in college. That a bunch of us that played soccer at UW all did that while we were in school. And so it was a pretty flexible job, just Mariners games primarily, but we worked and then we go to the game after we got off work. So
Nice.
pretty good, pretty easy gig. But
Yeah, sounds like it.
yeah, and once we got done with that, I mean, I really went straight into real estate after school. And another buddy of mine that he had started in real estate, another soccer guy that I grew up with, and so that made it. I mean, I'm going to try this, and see how it goes. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
the early stages. And of course, when you're 22 years old, you don't have any friends that are buying houses. And then other people, they're like, it's hard for people to trust you when you're just fresh out of school and you're a young kid and you're trying to do real estate. So needless to say, that was pretty challenging, getting started that young in real estate. But the hard knocks of real estate when you're starting out, I think no matter what age you are, it's there's a learning curve to it. So, and I worked with somebody that had been in business for a long time that helped make it easier when I realized, okay, I need to find some kind of mentor to help me figure out this business.
Okay. Who was your mentor?
Was a guy named David Copeland.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
he was at the Beery and John L. Scott office back in the day, and he was a very creative individual and did worked with some builders and investors, and then his traditional real estate business stuff that he was doing. He had a lot of success. So it definitely helped me kind of get some experience, get some real transactional experience in doing deals. So it was great.
So how many years have you been doing real estate now?
Oh gosh, it's about 20 years, I think. Just
Okay.
over 20
Right
years.
on.
Yeah.
Good for
Yeah.
you. That's great. So you worked with David and you started to work with contractors and construction folks and stuff. So did you start off just doing resale first and then sort of transition into what you're doing now?
I really helped with transaction coordination for Dave. I really wasn't making a lot of money in real estate. So my father-in-law was a handyman. And so he would always do side jobs, after work and on weekends. And so that kind of helped me, be around construction and learn how to swing a hammer. I'd never really swung a hammer, my entire life before that. So
Yeah.
he'd bring me out on the job site, and it was kind of laughable because anybody else that, had any experience would see me, trying to swing a hammer, and the 20 swings it would take me, they would do it in two. So
Yep. Yep.
it's like anything, so it was, but that kind of helped get me by. Well, I didn't have a lot of, traditional real estate stuff going on.
Yeah, makes sense. So transaction coordination and then a little bit of why don't I, actually swing a hammer and learn a little bit more about construction. But meanwhile, there's something brewing that maybe you don't really know yet. And the creation of Stark Homes happened. So tell us a little bit about when you transitioned and what drew you to do what you're doing now.
The market was just starting to pick up around 2003, 2004. So I started to do a little bit more traditional real estate with my own clients. And then I was gaining this experience in doing a little bit of construction. Then the other buddy of mine that was still doing real estate, he was working with some investors, and then Dave had some investor clients that he was working with, and I was just seeing that part of the business happen. That was really interesting to me to kind of combine those two things together with construction and real estate. And so I bought a house for my personal house, thinking, oh gosh, what a great investment. Buy a fixer, fix it up, get that experience, and get a deal, because I really couldn't afford, a house that wasn't a fixer at the time. And so it was really the way for me to buy a property. I just remember so vividly, and anytime I've, talked about this, it just, I can't forget it. And I didn't do any inspection when we bought this house. I'd done a couple roofs and side jobs with my father-in-law, and 20 something years old, I thought I knew, I thought I knew construction. Oh, I don't need an inspection. Yeah, we can fix this house up. And my father-in-law comes over after we buy it, because I surprised him, like, oh, we bought this house. It was only down the street from them. And he's like, oh, this is so great. And he goes up to the house. He's looking at the outside, and he's got a screwdriver in his hand, and he just pokes a hole right through the siding, and it goes right through the
No.
siding, and there's no sheeting underneath siding. And right away he's like, did you get an inspection on this house?
Oh no.
So
Shoot.
it was pretty funny. And needless to say, it's kind of a blessing. I mean, it was a nightmare at the time, because it was like, oh, we gotta do everything to this house. But in going through that experience, having to do everything and not knowing how to do any of this stuff really, and him coming over there after hours, he'd get me started on a project, and then he'd be like, okay, I've now shown you how to do this. Now it's your job. And he would come and check on me, a couple of times a week, and see how I was doing, help me out, because he's feeling sorry for me over there by myself.
Uh-huh.
But
Oh my
great,
gosh.
great learning experience. I mean, that really gave me a little bit of experience in all those little parts of fixing up a house. And so I think that's what kind of led into doing more of that. And I was working with another investor, and I was just helping them. I was finding the house, right? I was working as an agent. And so I would find a fixer for them. I would write up the contract. I'd get paid on the purchase, as an agent, make a commission. And then I would help them with the construction management to get the house fixed up. And then I would get paid another commission when I listed it and sold it for them. So at that time, it was the greatest thing ever. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get some commissions in real estate.
Yeah.
That had never been something that I was able to do on a steady basis. So it gave me some steady business. So that really helped kind of me get through those, slow times, and okay, learning the investment part of the business, but actually making some money too, without having to take that risk of doing the deal myself. Cause I think that's a really hard transition for anyone. It's always the fear of like, okay, if, I got to take this risk without the experience, and it's my own money. So it gave me that opportunity to do that without having to be the one that's putting up the money to do the project. So basically, it wasn't a partnership, but I looked at it that way. I felt like, if I find them a good deal on a house, help them get it fixed up, help them get it sold. If they're making money, then they're going to keep doing it.
Everyone's happy. Yeah, definitely.
So
So you're starting off by working with investors, doing the construction management, helping them find the deal, getting them in it, and then helping the construction management and then listing again. And getting sort of your feet wet, if you will, on not really being the one to invest yet, but helping investors. So I imagine that went on for a while and maybe still does. But now it seems like your company is to be also the investor. Is that true? Do you still have investors you work with, or how does that go now?
Our primary focus of our business right now is for acquisition, construction, and sale. On most of the stuff that we do, I'm not getting commission when we buy something. There's other agents that we work with that are doing the list backs after the projects are done. So really the primary focus of our business is on the investment and construction side of real estate. Over the years we've tried to do all of it and then scale back and do less, like just we've been trying to do the real estate and the construction and design and even staging and all these different parts of it. And it's just like it's like a jack of all trades, master of none, where I think over the years we've realized what do we enjoy doing the most, what part of the business, and let's focus on that. And it's funny, there's this saying that, and everybody's different because there's people that have big successful businesses and they love that and they're really good at that. We've kind of been focused on just doing more with less, I would say, because we've had stages over the years where like, oh, things are going really good, let's grow the business, bring in more people, expand. And it's like there's challenges that come with that, and there's trade-offs. So
Sure.
we build it up and then we scale back a little bit. And so it's kind of been like every 3 to 5 years, how we've operated. It's like, but I think now there's different stages for everybody, but we're kind of like, okay, it's nice to just focus on trying to do the best job we can and not getting too far over our skis and just staying steady and consistent with our business.
Hmm.
So
I love that. I love one of the things that you said among many good things there, the jack of all trades and master of none. I think it's super easy for realtors to get into this business and get a taste of something and then say, I can do that and I can do that and I can do that. And at the end of the day, it's best to play to your strengths and hire out the things that you could do, but you're not going to be nearly as good as it's someone who that is their main deal, right? So I made an analogy a long time ago with my hair. I mean, I could color my own hair, right? I could highlight it and it would not look like it does now, but I could do it and I could save some money, right? But at the end of the day, I really want people that color hair every day to color my hair because they're better at it and they know the nuances of it. And that's a small example and it's a small scale, obviously, of money, but it really does apply to all of this. And that's to say, agent out there, if you're listening to this and you're kind of dipping your toe in, I think I could stage and sell real estate. There's so many good stagers out there. Let them do what they do great, best.
yeah.
And don't take those things on. Yeah, that's a really smart point. So you're not necessarily doing resale stuff as much anymore, but you're really focusing on acquisition of properties, whether that's other realtors bringing it to you and or plots of land that you're then building new construction homes on. Do you still have a kind of a book of investors that you work with, or is this Stark Homes investment money that's kind of funding all this and buying homes, etc.?
It all depends on how many projects that we have going on at a time. But what I would say is that everybody that I know that is at different stages in this business and at different levels does things a little bit differently. Most people, when you're first starting out, you would use hard money for acquisition for a property. And so on a hard money purchase, the hard money lender might require 20% down of the total project cost for the acquisition, the purchase price, and the construction costs. So if you added those two together and then you took 20% of that, that would be the funds they would want you to bring to closing to purchase that deal. And then over time, people might, find that they do one or two deals. If somebody's lucky, maybe they have somebody that's going to lend them the money that they know for a purchase and acquisition. And that's great for people that, have that opportunity. But we were first started, we were using hard money for acquisitions. And then over time, there's other options. There's commercial lending, which really isn't an easy thing to get if you're doing flips. For commercial lending is primarily for new construction, spec building. So that's a whole different animal than flip financing typically. But also, smaller community banks sometimes have flexibility and depending on someone's experience might be able to finance flips for certain individuals based on the experience that they have. It's pretty rare, but we're fortunate enough to have that as an option. It was great when rates were lower. Now commercial financing is similar to the cost of hard money financing. So
Wow. Which
there's not
is
a
like
big difference.
10% ish around
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So I think it's like around 9% now.
Okay.
Um, so
Yeah,
it's
that's expensive money.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges for a lot of
Sure.
investors is figuring out how much can I pay? How much is the construction going to be? And then what's this going to sell for when it's done? And of course, things change so fast now in the market that
Yeah.
figuring those things out it's more challenging than it's ever been. You get done with a project in spring and list it. Oh man, it's great. Multiple offers is getting bid up and then, oh, it took me a little bit longer to do the construction than I expected. Well, now we're selling it in at the end of summer. Oh man, what a tough time. Like this is challenging and prices have softened up. It's really tough, but it's also, sometimes it's just luck too. I feel like for the last couple of years, every time I sit there and say, "Oh, the market's softening up." Well, a couple months goes by and then things pick back up again.
Yeah, we're
So,
lucky for that for Seattle. It seems like too, Jimmy, that, you're not only dealing with timing, but you're dealing with construction costs. I mean, I read recently about the exponential costs of materials for builders and that has really changed the game a little bit. And then the cost of the money itself, right? Like you said, if you're at 9% for carrying costs for a project, the sooner the better to finish it. But also you're paying more just to buy a 2x4 to build something. And so the cost of new construction should legitimately be higher for all those reasons.
yeah, it's really challenging right now to do, really, in my opinion, it's any construction. Flips are easier because there's less time. So the construction costs, they're higher than they've ever been. And for newer investors, they just have to be really cautious in budgeting for projects because things are always going to cost more than you think they are. We
Yep.
always have a 10% contingency, and it usually will go over that. That 10% just like, okay, well, let's try to keep it to, within that range, do our very
Yep.
best. But by
Yeah.
the time you add all the numbers up at the end, you just try to get as close to that as you can. And I see people post things about, you got to stay on budget, you got to stay on budget. But the challenge with that is if you are working so hard to stay on budget and I don't want to say beating people down on price when you're working with subcontractors, but it's like you're negotiating so much that the profits they're making are so small because the construction costs are so high that they get halfway through the project and then they disappear. Then it costs you more money, more time because you got to find a new contractor.
Yeah.
You got to figure out, where they left off, maybe fix things that they did wrong because at the end of it, nobody's there to manage it because they can only afford to have somebody there, their cheapest labor doing this work to try to not lose money on a project. So, yeah, the construction costs, all these different factors coming together. It's really a tough time to be doing investment right now, especially with the softening market. That's one more factor, right? Doing it in, this spring actually wasn't that bad because things kind of picked up a little bit. Now we're seeing things, in my opinion, really slow down. I mean, inventory, I really look at inventory close. And the difference between we were around 120 listings for single family, not including condos in West Seattle, and now we're up over 200. And I always tell, the people I work with, I follow it so close, but they're like, why do you pay so close attention to it? I'm like, anytime I've seen it get over 200, it's like, man, that's when things are changing. I mean,
Yeah.
I truly
Yeah.
believe that for West
Yeah.
Seattle,
For sure.
because that's where 90% of our projects are. So,
Okay. Nice to work in your own neighborhood. I have an idea that I'd love to run by you. I've been doing this for 23 years, and it seems like people like you and other kind of investor flipper companies uh, can make it and do a great business because they have multiple projects happening at once. I think what people are drawn to about flipping is the person who says, I'm going to try it out and I'm going to buy one house and I'm going to not know what I'm doing very well. And I'm going to probably invest too much money in the wrong places in that house and make it too nice in a way. And then at the end of the day, they've made $30,000, maybe. I'm making up a number, but, and they, 6 months of this project. And that's just frankly not worth it. So I guess I'd love to hear one, if you agree with that, but then two, what advice would you give for someone who says, I do want to try this out? I want to see if I can do this. I want to buy a fixer. I want to invest some money in it. And is there money to be made if it's your only project?
Where our successes come from is that we never really get too much or too little going on at one time. So as long as we stay steady, then things always tend to level out. You just find that happy medium. And so I think that does help you make up for slower times. And I've had projects where I'm just like, gosh, I'm just glad we got that sold and got out of that
Yeah.
deal. And,
Yeah.
I feel fortunate that, we didn't lose money. So that's just part of the business. And I think the challenging part is that there's more new people trying this out than ever. And so it's harder to find a decent project that isn't like a total fixer. I think for somebody that's starting out, it's trying to find a project, an old craftsman house, for example. We had multiple projects going on, and one of the projects we had bought was this old craftsman. And I just know how much we've been doing those houses for, 20 years. I know how much work goes into those. Those are, you touch one thing and you're redoing everything.
Sure.
So you've been in West Seattle and sold houses in West Seattle, so you know how those houses can be. I thought, well, gosh, rather than to spend the next 6 to 8 months fixing this house up and then not making any money, I'm going to sell it. And another investor bought it from us, and not to say not making any money, but just knowing that there's going to be a lot of time and energy that goes into it. So there's going to be an opportunity to do an easier deal. So trying to make sure that the first deal that you do is an easier one. Maybe there's not as much, that big craftsman house, somebody's going to spend the time and energy. They're going to make good money, but they're going to spend a lot more time and energy to make that money than if they had potentially, found an easier deal that took less time and less energy.
Uh-huh.
So,
Uh-huh.
if you made 30,000, but for somebody new, let's say it took you 5 to 6 months to do a cosmetic fixer versus one of those craftsman houses they buy and it takes them a year because,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's like every time they turn around, the contractor is calling them and saying, oh, now we got to do this. Now we got to change this. So trying to make that first project something that's more manageable. So it's just, you can get the experience without being overwhelmed.
Pocket Hours is brought to you by Scout Real Estate. Hi, I'm Jennifer Nelson, owner at Scout Real Estate. I started this firm with the vision of doing things differently, with our focus on legendary service for our clients and creating a community of producing agents to spur each other to do higher quality work. If you are interested in learning more about how a small group of like-minded brokers have come together to have some fun while doing a lot of business, reach out to me, 206-227-7966, or email jennifer@scoutrealestate.com. I promise you this, fun is a high priority for me, but so is winning. So if you appreciate those two things, you might be interested in Scout. Looking forward to hearing from you. There are a lot more folks sort of trying their hand at this. It's interesting as a realtor on this end to be touring these homes and to sort of be able to tell the difference between someone who this is their first flip and you can tell. And right, like some things are overdone and some things are not done enough. And they feel a little panicked to me when you talk to them on the phone. because they're trying to make a profit on this project, and it's a real kind of small margin. And so I think for you, having the experience, knowing what you're doing, what projects to keep, what projects to let go of, and then one might not make you as much money, but this other one, did great. And so it all sort of balances out because you have different irons in the fire. Is there any advice besides what you've said to someone who says, I want to try this? Is there something you can say, gosh, if there's one thing I could hang my hat on in terms of advice, what would you tell them?
I think the most challenging part of this business is understanding value. And so trying to lean on an experienced agent, I think that for our business, that's what's really helped us be successful is that when you've been doing real estate for so long, and you go into enough houses and you understand, how to comparables, and then you get a good idea. Nobody's got a crystal ball. I think even the most experienced agents, you list a house and you're like, this is what I think it's going to sell for. And you're surprised sometimes. Usually, it's hopefully surprised for the better and it sells for more. But,
Sure.
for a new investor, really finding someone with some knowledge and experience in understanding value so that when you buy something, it's a good price on the acquisition. It affords you some leeway in maybe not having as much experience on the construction side, because I think it's hard if you overpay for something in the beginning and
Yeah.
then you're trying to save money on the construction. That's a harder transition to make than if you got a really good deal when you bought something and then maybe you spend a little bit more on the construction. I just think it gives you more flexibility, understanding value so that you get a good deal when you make the purchase. And hopefully that would, get you'd be further ahead that way than trying to cut corners on the construction side of things.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. For brokers that are listening to this, when we publish it, it feels to me like one of the best ways to do this would be to find land or opportunities that they might have and send them your way and see if there's a partnership that could happen there. So you sort of talked about that brokers sometimes bring you stuff and there's a list back or something you can work out with them. Is that true? Is that something you're looking for, that we could have brokers hear that message today?
Yeah, I think it's the same idea like what I spoke about when I first started is as an agent you have experience in understanding value. I think we've all had clients over the years at some point that maybe their house needed work and they didn't want to spend money to get it ready to list. And so they might say, hey, if you knew someone that was interested in buying it, without us having to do anything, what we tell people is when we're purchasing a property, we're buying it as is so they can just take what they want and leave whatever they don't. So it makes that transition easier. In working with agents, I think it helps that I've been an agent for so long because, I know how delicate those situations can be when you're working with clients, and especially ones that maybe have tougher situations. Not to say that that's always the case, because sometimes we buy properties where it's a development site. So they're selling it to us off market to build and develop, houses on. And it's not like it's a fixer or, something like that. We work really good with agents. That's really the biggest part of our business right now in finding acquisitions. And then agents that we're working with, they're doing the list backs after we do the acquisition when the project's done, whether it's a flip or a new construction. So, I feel like it's a win-win, for everybody. And that's really helped us purchase a lot more properties in the last couple of years as we built closer relationships with a lot of agents. And I'm always calling agents. I'm sure anybody in West Seattle, I'm checking in with people and I ask them their opinion on what's going on with the market and how it's going, and just try to make sure that we're keeping those relationships open and people know that we're there. So yeah, anytime that we can build new relationships with agents that might have a property that they think we'd be interested in, we definitely love to have that conversation, because we do all different kinds of projects, and that's I think helped us a lot lately too. Is that there's some people that they might just do flips, or they might only do new construction. And, sharing a property with someone, you always are protective of your client. And so if you can bring it to somebody that, well, is this a flip? Is this a new construction development site? Can I trust this person to give me good information? Most of the deals that we see, it's like, hey, this isn't the right property for us potentially as a flip, but this is a development site, or vice versa. Like, yeah, there's something specific about this property that it's not really a development site because of X, Y, and Z, but this is the highest value for this property is as a flip.
You bring that knowledge and expertise, and yeah, that's good to know. So for agents listening, I think Jimmy's kind of, well, I'll sum up to say is that he's putting himself out there as a resource for you, and he would love to create partnerships with more agents in West Seattle specifically for, what could be done to this house for your client that would be in its best, highest and best use. So Jimmy, I'm gonna give you a scenario. I have been doing this a long time, and I've had people say, okay, we own this house in front, but we know that the back can be developed, subdivided, whatever it is. And we're just convinced that it's worth X. And the number is usually quite high. And so I have tried in the past to give them a percentage of what a builder is likely going to pay for dirt based on what it could sell for later. And so is there sort of a number that would be helpful for brokers to hear? That, of course, it depends on the project. I get all that. But is there, like in the past, I've said 25 to 30% is what they'll pay for a lot, because then they have their construction costs and all the things they have to do, permitting, et cetera, to then end up at a final price that pays them and actually makes sense for them. Is that still a number that's good to count on percentage wise?
Yeah, I would say, because of the construction costs, being where they're at. And of course, when the market is on an upswing or a downswing, right? And the builder sentiment is more positive, then I think people get more conservative and pull back a little bit. But 25%, might not be a bad number, but I never look at it percentage wise because there's so many other factors that can affect the cost to develop, the types of units that you might put there, even the desirability of the units after they're done being built. So, I've heard people say, use percentages in the past, but I think it's with all the changes that have happened recently, every time that you think where your cost is as a builder, or even where the resale is on, for the after, for the project when it's done, it's always changing. And then with these changes that are coming in with the higher density, it's really going to be a learning curve over the next, year. Like, okay, what can you do here? Okay, you can do 6, but well, are 6 units going to be desirable on this lot in this location? So there's all these other pieces to it that I think everybody is figuring out right now. But percentage wise, I mean, yeah, I think 25% is probably a decent basis, but location, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so they're just, with how expensive construction is right now, it's hard to build in, you really are building in the most expensive locations now. So these changes in zoning might not have as much of an impact on development in areas that are more affordable. So I think for agents, really keeping that in mind is that, well, okay, is this an A location when it comes to resale? As far as like, is this one of the most expensive areas? If it is, a builder's, going to be interested in this. Is this a B location? Oh, well, the tough part is in those locations, 6 months ago, builders had an appetite for that. They would still buy and do that, build new construction. Now it's like, oh, well, the cost of the construction, softening prices. I don't know. I'm gonna be a little bit more conservative now. So, but it also, every site is different. So that's why we'd be a great resource and at least giving people an idea of what might be an option to do on some of these properties now with these changes.
As you look at individual projects, and I know you've just sort of said there's so many factors that help you decide whether this is a good project or bad project or project you're not going to take. But is there anything that has you say, if you're not going to make X amount of money or X percentage over what you've invested, then it's not really worth it. So if the person that owns the land, or my client, let's say, says, I want to sell my house as is, but I'm not going to sell it unless it's this price. Is there a percentage that you say, gosh, if it's not going to make us 20% more, I'm making up a number, then it just isn't a go for us?
I think it's just a combination of the time and cost. So I don't know that I could tell you, oh, if we didn't make, $50,000 on a project, it wouldn't be worth it.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, is this a cosmetic fixer where we're just doing carpet and paint and minor repairs and cleaning out, getting everything out of the house? It's like an apartment turnover. If it's like an apartment turnover, then our, expectation would be different, and then of course it would depend on, okay, is it $500,000 acquisition price? Is it $900,000 acquisition price? So,
Yeah. It really
we don't,
depends.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's hard to have a number for that. But what I would say is that, the market can change quickly too. So, if I thought, well, gosh, if we got done with this and we were, making $50,000, I mean, the market can shift $50,000 in a slow market. You can lose that over a summer easy, or even over a month. I mean, I feel like if somebody was selling in April, they probably got, 5 to 7% more through multiple offers
Hmm.
compared to what they might get now with only getting one offer and selling at their list price,
Yeah.
right? So,
We
or
talk,
having to reduce the price.
right? Kind of a killer. Yeah. We talk at Scout all the time that we call it the market of the week because, you really have to pay attention to what it seemed like it took just a real sharp turn recently. And we always have a slowdown in the summertime, like we're in now, but this one took a pretty abrupt turn. And so just paying attention, right, to all those details. So, Jimmy, how many projects do you have going right now?
We have 5 projects going on right now, and they're 3 new construction and then 2 flip projects.
Okay.
So,
Does that include the ones that are currently on the market or not?
no, we don't have any active projects. We have the 2 flip projects are going to be done in the next month. So it's going to be interesting, not the best timing, but, we'll see what happens. And like I said, we stay pretty steady. So, if you're making money, then it's a win in some markets. And I think this is one of those markets right now where if you bought a flip project, you are, hoping that, okay, I'm just hoping that I can make some money and move on to the next one.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but but yeah, always got to stay optimistic regardless of what's happening, but realistic but optimistic.
I like it. Two more things before I let you go. And again, thank you so much for your time. But the first is, do you think that the continued trend toward this dadu, right, whether that's new construction, there's a home in front, and then there's a separate unit or detached unit that that builders are selling separately, is going to be a continued trend? And is that something you've done and you're going to continue to do?
We have projects that were slated to do dadus on before these changes started to take effect. And then we decided to put a pause on moving forward with the dadu because we could do more units. 2 of the sites that we had slated for dadus, we are going to build 2 units in the back that are bigger units. So that's one of the changes that I think the dadus are going to have their place in the investment development side, but I don't think it's going to be as prevalent as it has been over the last couple years, because with these changes you're going to be able to build bigger units. So
Okay.
there's going to be a trade-off where there's still people doing dadus because you can do a stock dadu plan and get a permit quickly. So
Okay.
there's a certain plan that you can get permitted in a month and a half. That's a pre-approved plan. That's the schooner plan. That's the one that we've always built. So its value is that you can do it quickly compared to doing bigger units and doing
Hmm.
more bigger detached units, but then the permitting is going to take longer. So let's call it 2 to 3 months for a pre-approved schooner plan dadu, or probably 8 to 12 months to do, full construction that's going to be for multiple units that are bigger.
Okay.
So the one that we were going to do a dadu on, uh, instead of just doing the 1,000 square foot dadu, now we're going to do two 1,700 square foot units in the back. The city, it's still, there's a temporary plan, so it's still going to figure things out. But I think there's going to be less dadus that are being built because you're going to be able to build more units and detached. So we're in the past, 5 years, there's been what we call three packs, which are the 3 units on a single family lot. That there's a main unit and then an ADU and the dadu. And now imagine you would do 3 detached units, or maybe 4 detached units, or maybe 2 detached units and 2 attached units. And they can be bigger. I think, 1,000 square feet, that's a good size. You can get a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath into those, which is amazing. But I think like
Doable.
a 1,200, 1,500, 1,700 square foot unit, there's a bigger range of people that might be looking for those units depending on the location. So I think those are going to be more common now that these changes are going to go into effect, and there'll be less dadus built because of the changes allow for bigger units.
And then Jimmy, just if there's a way for you to kind of quickly say what's the majority of the changes that are happening that you'd keep referring to? Is that allowing more coverage of a lot, or what are the changes that you're talking about?
Yeah, it has to do with the new housing bills that are being implemented. And I'm not even 100% clear on it yet because, we work with an architect. They help us figure out what we can put on the lots. What I understand of these changes is that you can do 4 detached units on any single family zone property now. So just for agents to understand this, I think it would be valuable is that multifamily zone property is going to really be impacted negatively by these changes. So if you have clients that have a multifamily zone property, LR1, or I don't know if RSL is going away, but if it was RSL or LR properties, traditionally those have been really valuable. But the problem is now you can do more units on NR zoned properties and you don't have to pay an MHA fee. So if you have a multi-family zone property, just whatever the MHA fee might be, it's like, we'll knock that off the price, right
What's an
off the top. It's
MHA?
like
Tell me what MHA is.
the MHA fee is the mandatory housing affordability fees that
Okay.
you have to pay when you're developing a multi-family property.
And is it expensive or?
It is expensive. Let's just say it's on a square footage basis. If you went on to SDCI, the Seattle Department of Construction site, you'd see they have a formula on there that tells you for these locations, this is the cost for the MHA fee. So let's say it's $23 a square foot, and you're building 4 1,500 square foot units. So that's 6,000 square feet that you're building. And let's just say it's $20 for easy math. That's a $120,000 MHA fee that's being paid.
Got it.
So now you could do those same 4 units on an NR zone property with no MHA fee.
Got it.
So
Okay.
just right away, instead of those multifamily sites being more valuable, then they become less valuable because of these changes that are happening.
Because of the zoning. Makes sense. Okay. Well, that's great information. Yeah. And for the people that are listening in and will listen into this interview, I think this has just been a real wealth of knowledge, and it's fun to get the chance to get to know you more and sort of figure out how you started and where you got where you are, and what huge success you've been having. So congratulations in that. And I hope to
Thanks.
work with you. I'd love to find you some dirt or figure out a way we could partner together because I've always admired your work. So thank you for being on the show, Jimmy. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Enjoy this
And hope
weather.
I hope your daughter does well at the tournament.
Yeah, I just found my wife just came over and said they won 1-0, so they squeaked it out. So we got
All right.
one more game today, so I'm excited.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thanks
Yeah.
again for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening into Pocket Hours. I hope this has been interesting, fun, made you laugh, made you think, spurred you on to do and implement some new things in your business. I appreciate your time and hope this has been a good use of it, period. Now, go be the agent you would hire.